Welcome back, warriors, where war never ends, insanity never lasts. Don't forget to hit subscribe, turn on notifications, embrace yourselves, because from here on out, there is only war. Let's go. I talk a lot of smack about the Emperor. I'll freely admit it. I made a whole video about gods that are better than him. After all, I think it's becoming more and more apparent. Things like the Horus heresy go on, that he kind of deserves it, called his true self and intentions being revealed, retconning into horrible lore or whatever you want. He's been shown to be a bit of a jerk, and the first thought Gilman had upon speaking to him since his reawakening was, gee, Dad, sure is kind of the worst, isn't he? I don't think it's unfair to say that there's no shortage of gods that are better at being gods than the Emperor is. But that being said, for some reason I've been feeling a bit more charitable towards him lately. Not enough to say he's a good god by any stretch of the imagination, at least not across the board. But I did some thinking, and honestly, at least by the standards of 40k and Warhammer in general, Oli isn't too bad. There are certain areas he excels at in the realm of divinity, and certain areas he falls flat on his face. Overall, as you can probably guess by the title of this video, I would place him at a solid C tier on the god tier list that I've decided exists. Now no, this isn't a tier list video, but let me walk you through my thought process on this, and hopefully you'll see the Emperor in a bit of a new light, be it a more or less favorable one. Quick bit of setting the groundwork here. I'm not really factoring in power, because by the standards of power alone, he's probably the strongest individual deity in Warhammer. Gore and Mor, either fighting together or combined into Goramorka, could probably take him, but that doesn't happen very often. I don't think anyone else, Kincaid or Asuan in their heyday probably could, but certainly not now, and his very nature is anathema to the Chaos Gods. So even if SEK is stronger than him, I still think Ampy could defeat Khorne in a 1v1, which would take place of course on Rust, where all 1v1s do know. I'll be judging him based on how he is as a guy, and a variety of categories you'll soon see that are largely based on his followers. Oh, and I'll also be including fantasy and AOS gods. It'll be more fun that way. First area of divinity. His followers, numbers, and strength. In this one, I think the Emperor is pretty solidly in the lead as a god. The Imperium is a dominant force in the Milky Way, with trillions upon trillions of people worshipping him as their deity, while other gods certainly have more followers, such as the Orcs and Skaven. The Emperor is hardly lacking in the numbers department. The Chaos Gods, while still having plenty in their name, definitely don't have as many worshippers as he does, even taking into account every single traitor, Astartes, Guardsman, and Cultist. The Imperium has more, which essentially means the Emperor has more, and if you take into account gods like those of the Elves are indeed the Eldar, it's not even close. There are nowhere near as many Eldar as there are humans. It's as simple as that. Sure, at the height of their empire there might have been, but that's not when the Emperor was a god now, was it? So I don't think I can count it, even being the elf simp I am. I mean, there's probably only thousands of Harlequins in the galaxy, maybe in the low millions tops. If you really want to get ridiculous with the numbers in 40k, and really want to give the Elder some credit, which I do, so let's go with that. Compare that to the uncountable billions in the Guard alone. Almost all of humanity in 40k worships the God Emperor, lending him strength and giving him the edge compared to the other gods of the Warhammer settings, even taking into account fantasy and, indeed, Age of Sigmar. The titular god of the setting, so he doesn't have every single human firmly in his camp as the Emperor largely does in 40k. Many worship other gods, such as Cain or even Goramorka. Other gods, gods that largely have an entire faction devoted to them, are in the same boat, as well as mixing in things holding back the gods of races like the Eldar or Tyrian Ts. Despite not presiding over a dying race like elves usually are, they still can't compare to the Emperor's followers, even taking into account the scaling of AOS being a bit smaller than 40k. The T-Twins don't have anywhere near the complete dominance of worship the Emperor does, over either the mortal realms as a whole, or even over all the elves alone in AOS. As for the power of his followers, the Emperor can count on the Imperial Guard, the Sisters of Battle, Mechanicus, Custodes, and of course the Space Marines, just to name a few. While yes, the Space Marines and Custodes generally don't consider him a god, they still fight in his name and carry out what they believe to be his will. I still personally think their belief in him as the ruler lends him strength in the same way the average person's belief in his deity status does, and even if it doesn't, they're still fighting in his name regardless. So they still count as a follower of some sort. And while the Mechanicus view on the Emperor varies quite heavily between believing him to be the Omnis, an aspect of it, or being in who strong-armed the card boys into following him, they still fight for him and alongside his more direct followers. Enough that for the sake of this category, I'm counting them as well. He has the mightiest and most effective force in Warhammer by sheer virtue of its number and variety. I firmly believe 1v1, the forces of the Eldar, Necrons, and TOA can fight the Imperium and win, be it because of better training, psychic might, tech, or a mix of all three. I think they've got the advantage, especially the Eldar. May Assyrian guide them to victory. But the Emperor has such a variety of forces and such extreme numbers that eventually his followers will come out on top in any 1v1 situation. Granted, this is ignoring any super weapons like the Necrons or Eldar have, because then it just turns into mutually assured destruction. He doesn't have the mightiest followers in Warhammer, or even the one with the best tricks. Saint Celestine may fall to certain greater demons if they play their cards right. And if I remember correctly, the Celestine Prime, one hot demon, the size of a small country, I don't care how hard you masturbate over Space Marines. The Celestine Prime could put any of them in the dirt. Only fitting, of course, as he is Karl Franz after all. But he has an abundance of good enough followers, so in this category I put him in the S tier. As for the loyalty of his followers, however, now the Emperor has fallen down the ranks, I'll give him a C- for this category, and here's why. The majority of Imperials are firmly loyal to the Emperor, or at least are in a position where they have no other choice but to be loyal. Problem is, enough of them turn traitor that it frequently leads to entire worlds being destroyed. Imperial governors frequently fall to Slen Iser Zinch in a hive city. Without at least some amount of chaotic presence, a hive city only exists in the imagination. Hell, 9 of his kids betrayed him, and that was when he was walking around still talking to people. For every dozen guardsman regiments crying for the Emperor and believing it with all their heart, there's a couple that would readily switch teams to stay alive, and a couple that would be outright happy to shed some blood for the blood god. Imagine a Harlequin betraying Karak, not being corrupted, consciously deciding to turn against him. That's not happening. It just isn't. They're far too fanatically devoted to Karak to do so. The same holds true of many other gods. Plenty of Chaos cultists are firm believers of their patron gods. This may be a mistake on their part, but misplaced loyalty is still loyalty. Greenskins are almost universally devoted to Gork in war. The odd one might turn to Khorne or, very rarely, Nurgle, but they are few and far between. And even if it's only because it's usually a one-way ticket, as a whole, Chaos followers generally don't turn against Chaos. Once you're in Nurgle's big disgusting family, you're usually in for life, and if you try and leave, they'll take your life. Aside from that one group up of them that earns you a spot in the book. If you ever talk about them, no dwarf would ever dream of turning his back on the ancestor gods, while elves do join the cult of Sesh. These are relatively infrequent occurrences, at least compared to the amount of people that turn away from the Emperor, and while the Skaven might only do it out of fear, they still worship the Horned Rat with all their little rodent huts. But he's still not the worst god in this department. While the Stormcast most definitely are loyal to Sigma, or the standard human fantasy or AOS isn't that much less likely to fall to Chaos than in 40k. Sigma doesn't make you work in a factory 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, so it isn't as bad with him, but it's still a frequent worry. Also, take note of what I said about Chaos followers staying loyal to Chaos. Notice how I said they generally don't turn away. And both Fantasy and 40k have followers telling him to go to hell. Spoilers for what else, but Gautry and Felix ahead, so cover your ears and jump ahead about 15 seconds if you want to avoid that. During the Siege of Prague, there was a Chaos cult, as of Zing, that throughout the story had more and more doubts about what he was doing, and his dying act was to save a family member of his from an assassination that he had planned. In 40k, ARA doesn't even like CCH, and of course there's Rylender letting Vastarel blow Fulgrim straight back to hell. I know infighting between the Chaos gods is nothing new, but I just feel like FIO had a bit of a revelation about Chaos as a whole. Maybe I got the wrong message out of it, but I say it stands to serve my point. Also, no spoiler warning for Rylender, because everyone knows about Rylender. There's a song about Rylender. I'm pretty sure Rylender has become one of the first things people know about 40k when they're new to the setting. But to keep on topic, Z seems to have problems with his followers having Disney-style moments of heroic clarity. There's also gods like Nagash. Almost none of Nagash's followers like Nagash. Nobody likes Nagash. Even AR thinks he's the best bet against Chaos, and during the end times outright doubted his choice in bringing them back. Plenty of his followers actively work to escape his service. It's just that he could explode their heads with a thought, so they need to be careful about it. So overall, on the fields of follower loyalty, the Emperor is in low C tier. Not the worst, definitely not the best. If he were in a better position for this category, the Imperium wouldn't need to have one of its jobs be blowing up their own planets. Now how he treats his followers, and more generally, how they live, is D tier, bordering on F but just avoiding it. And remember, this is by Warhammer standards. Here's your reminder that living in the Imperium sucks for almost everyone involved. Hive worlds suck for about 99, a whole lot of 9% of all the people living on them. Even if you don't think it's non-stop factory work day in and day out, they're still rampant with overpopulation and pollution. Not fun places to live. And a very hefty chunk of humans live in those, at 40k Agar worlds, which also frequently suck. Forge worlds are hell with metal instead of fire, and human rights as a whole in the Imperium are the setup to a joke that ends with you being shot. Not great is my point. For every loyal Imperial citizen he empowers to fight Chaos, for every saint guided by the will of the Emperor, there are 1,000 psychers a day he eats to survive. Yeah, they're kind of being force-fed to him, but that knowledge doesn't envy the psyker. Now does it? There's also the fact that, like I said earlier, his son's fed, he's not a god worth worshipping. That one just says it all, doesn't he, dude? It's kinda hard to argue when the son of God tells you he was dead, is a douchebag. Now compare that to many other gods. Kagara will act to save Solitar from Slash when they die. Sigmar pulls people from otherwise certain death to turn them into Stormcast and actually gives a damn about his followers as people, not just part of his grand plan, and hell, Tyrion and Tease actively fight alongside the Lumen. You might say, to cut him a break because the Emperor can't do so anymore, but the end result either way is that they're on the field of battle alongside the worshippers, and he's not something you can do through no fault of your own. It is still something you can't do. Arguably, even some of the Chaos gods treat their followers better. Followers of Khorne usually want to kill people. K wants blood from killing people. Khorne gives his followers the power to kill people, which gives them blood. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. Sure, they live in hell, but that gives them more chances to murder things, so it's not really an issue. Slash cultists may have their souls turned into husks, but at least they're having fun before then. And Nurgle just loves his followers. They're all one big happy family, a smelly, disgusting family constantly dying of plague and horrible, horrible diseases, but they don't seem to mind too much. Some of the only gods who unarguably treat their followers worse than the Emperor are Tzeentch, the Horn Rat, and Nagash. Tzeentch will actively screw over your plots in favor of someone else's, for no other reason than it's amusing to him. And that's assuming he doesn't just turn into a Chaos SP on to see what happens. The Horns, at first appearance of the material plane, involved him eating several dozen Skaven alive. He didn't need to do this to sustain his form or anything. He just chose to be a dick. And Nash is Nash. I don't need to explain why he's a shitty god. He's Nash. It's very hard to outdo Nagash in the field of being a prick. In terms of unity of his followers, the Emperor gets a B rank. They're all mostly on the same page. Different planets often have different interpretations of the Emperor, and sometimes this causes either religious wars or the planet to be exploded. But other than that, they're mostly on the same page. Except for when the Inquisition and the Space Wolves fight each other, and the Space Wolves win, because they're, and the Grey Knights murder anyone who saw them for secret reasons. And the High Lords order a planet destroyed because someone had funny ideas about human rights on it. Let's bump the Emperor down to a C rank. Meanwhile, there's Tzeentch, who simultaneously has an F rank because his followers betray each other every time they blink, and an S-bar rank because they always play into his plans anyways. Chaos as a whole gets an F because they cannot stop betraying each other, and the Skaven also get an F because of the same reason. Except in their case, it's almost a biological requirement. Also, they have at least two majorly different interpretations of the Horn Rat between the average Grey Seers and Clan Pestilence, and this regularly causes Skaven civil wars, inasmuch as their entire society is in a constant state of civil war. And that is, and Nash gets a D, no one under him likes anyone else under him, and they fight openly and secretly with pretty alarming regularity. But Nagash can murder them with but a thought if he needs to, so eventually they learn to behave for at least a few minutes. And our boy Kalia Manon gets a D. If you're thinking, wait, but he doesn't really have any followers, remember the droid praised him over Assyrian, and the Dark Elves are only slightly less backstabby than Chaos. Granted, Cain doesn't really give a because the only thing he likes watching more than elves kill each other is people picking up cursed swords to kill elves with. But still, I guess if you count Exarch and whatnot to be his followers, then he gets an S, but there's so few of them, and no one's really an Exarch because they worship Cain a lot, that I don't think their presence is enough to sway things in Khan's favor. Not enough to outweigh people like Malekith. Anyways, as for gods better than him, Kager once again is taking the lead with an S, while the Harley Quinn certainly don't all have the same opinion on, say, who the biggest threat is. They don't really fight over it. It's more two different groups going, I think Cillius is the biggest problem. You think it's the Necrons. But we both agree. Their problems are there, and we have to deal with both of them, no matter which is worse. The Elar as whole are usually on the same page about things related to their gods, though. That being said, Ynad is certainly a point of contention, even amongst his followers. The Arain and the Vizar rarely agree on anything, which is kind of a problem because they're the ones calling the shots. Sigmar is getting an A, because his followers don't often fight with each other. From my readings, plenty of disagreements and witch hunters existing prove there are issues, to be sure, but nothing like the massive-scale civil wars of the Imperium. Elector counts get into petty disputes pretty often, but I see those more in the vein of border skirmishes than anything else, or petty honor disputes. Most of the religious disagreements of the Empire are between the cults of Sigmar and Olich, who's an entirely separate god. Though I suppose I did give the Emperor credit, with Mechanicus being a separate faction, so maybe I should bump down Sigmar a bit for that same reason. Then again, I like Sigmar more than the Emperor, so he keeps his A, because I can happily play favorites when it suits me. Finally, his domain. What does the Emperor own? Or a god of, and how effectively does it empower him? He's the god of stuff. I'll be honest, I don't have a clue what to call him. The god of the Imperium, I guess. But that feels kind of like, yeah, a state's god is the god of the state. That doesn't tell you what he is as a god or what he does. It just tells you that the state worships him. Does he gain power when people fight against chaos? Maybe when the guards are sisters of battle duet, but I doubt an all-our fighting Slesh is boosting the Emperor much. Is he a god of order, much like those old chaos gods of order from fantasy? Maybe, since his nature and power are themselves anathema to chaos, but I'm not really sure that fits either. Plus, there's no aspect of the Emperor that gives EMP power his followers can rally around other than as the protector of humanity. You can be a T-Desert Raider, or a Valhalla Ice Trooper, or a Sister of Battle, and their different versions of the faith all help empower the Emperor equally. Maybe the Sisters of Battle faith helps more, but that's more so how fanatical they are, rather than their specific brand of worship. That being said, he clearly has no problem drawing power from whatever his godly field is. The endless masses of humanity in 40k have spent 10,000 years empowering him to the point that he can light Nurgle's garden on fire without any massive risk to himself. Whatever his mystery domain is, it's clearly boosted his power after 10,000 years of worship. And yet, let's compare him to the other gods of the setting. Chaos gods easily take the lead in this category. Quan, for instance, is the bust of blood and war. When people are going to war, regardless of who it is, he gets a little bit of power from it. Wars is each when someone is doing a lot of scheming or using magic. Zen benefits a tiny bit even if they're plotting against them. All four of them have very easily defined domains that they draw power from, whether or not the people involved or even their followers in this. The Chaos gods are completely unmatched as gods. Most other gods have similar situations, just not as potent. The gods of each of the mortal realms in AOS are tied to their respective realm. When it's doing good, they're doing good. When it's not doing good, they're not doing good. And there are other minor gods that, while nothing compared to the Emperor in power, still have very clearly defined domains to get power from. My favorite example is NCOO, the minor chaos god of unbelief. While being a god of disbelief in a fantasy setting is certainly a bit rough, it's very easy to see who gives them power. If you don't believe in other gods and work to undermine their cults, you strengthen NCOO. He also looks like George from Seinfeld, because this is a very funny post I found, and it's now how I view him. So, to cap off, I give the Emperor a C in the category of domain, mostly because it's just so damn fake. I have no idea what it is, but whatever it isn't hindering him from getting power from his followers in any way. And there's my highly professional and in no way biased list of reasons why the Emperor is a very mid-god. Not good, not bad, just kind of there. I mean, he's probably a better god than Zeus. Zeus was a prick. Luminoff video will be coming. I was working on the script and for some reason could not think of what to write, got absolutely railed by writer block, so I made this instead. Recording has begun on it though, and I'm on the way to fully finishing the script for it as well. And that's it. You've survived yet another video of mine. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let me know what you think, or just rant about some filthy Xenos. That works too. Thank you, as always, to my wonderful channel members for putting up with my writer blog and general lack of anything resembling a coherent schedule. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching, and take care out there. And of course, the only god to get S ranked in everything, including power, is Malol. I bet you were wondering if I was going to mention him. Malol, he exists. I hate him. In fact, I just lied to you. I don't think he gets an S in anything. He gets an S in legal disputes, I guess, and an S in fans constantly asking for him to come back despite his presence, legally not being allowed in Warhammer. Then yes, I'm aware of the Sons of Malice. You don't need to bring them up. Much like the Emperor, both Malus and his sons are very mid, another chaos god. But this one hates chaos. Ooh, chaos already hates chaos. That's not special. Whereas Warhammer Cthulhu, some eldritch alien being, unknowable even to the chaos gods themselves, and I don't mean like the Katana or the Tide Hive Mind, I mean like Atho, or Shub. I can't say the middle of his name. Come on GW, you ripped off history and Michael Moorcock enough. Where's Cthulhu's love?